the end did not arrive with an explosion. It came with a heavy, almost offensive silence that settled over the ruins of Europe like invisible dust. In May 1945, when the guns finally fell quiet and the name Adolf Hitler ceased to be spoken as a living threat, many believed the world had passed through its darkest hour and could now return to something resembling normality. But no such return was possible. What existed instead was a planet exhausted, traumatized, and permanently altered by a war that had not only destroyed cities and armies, but shattered the unseen structures that had upheld the global order for centuries. Hitler's defeat was not a full stop. It was a long and dangerous pause in human history. The Europe that emerged from the war was no longer the center of the world. For generations, decisions made in European capitals had shaped the fate of entire continents. Empires had risen, expanded, and ruled vast populations from there. Now the continent lay broken, economically bankrupt, demographically mutilated, and morally scarred. Millions of dead were not abstract figures, but irreplaceable absences in families, towns, and cultures. Railways lay twisted, factories reduced to rubble, farmlands abandoned. The infrastructure that sustained modern life had been pulverized by years of systematic bombing. Total war had left no one untouched. Germany, the epicenter of the European conflict, had become a ghost of itself. The country was occupied, divided, humiliated, and quietly dismantled. Not only had its armed forces been defeated, but its national identity had been suspended. Symbols, institutions, laws, and narratives were erased along with buildings. For many Germans, defeat did not bring immediate liberation or relief, but hunger, confusion, and a profound sense of disorientation. The recent past was too shameful to defend, and the future did not yet exist. Amid rubble and refugee camps, a society took shape that no longer knew who it was. Yet the consequences of Hitler's defeat extended far beyond the defeated. The victors also paid a heavy price. Britain, though triumphant, was economically drained. Its empire, once a symbol of global dominance, began to show irreversible cracks. France, liberated at last, carried the trauma of occupation, collaboration, and internal division. Its victory was real, but morally complex. Non of Europe S. Traditional powers retained the strength to shape the world alone. The balance of history had shifted elsewhere. Into this vacuum stepped the powers that had survived the war not merely intact, but transformed by it. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as inheritors of a shattered world. Hitler's defeat removed the common enemy that had held these ideologically opposed forces together. With Nazism gone, differences that had once been tolerated became intolerable. Capitalism and communism, liberal democracy, and revolutionary authoritarianism no longer appeared as alternatives, but as existential threats to one another. The world did not enter peace. It entered suspension. Germany became the primary stage for this new confrontation. Divided into zones of occupation, it was transformed into a geopolitical laboratory. Each side reshaped its territory according to its own values, fears, and strategic interests. What was initially presented as a temporary arrangement soon hardened into permanent division. Families were separated, economies diverged, histories rewritten to fit ideology. Berlin, a wounded city deep inside divided territory, became the ultimate symbol of this fracture. Hitler's defeat had created a new kind of border, invisible yet absolute, ideological yet armed. At the same time, the promise of justice echoed through international courtrooms. Trials were held to demonstrate that certain crimes transcended politics and warfare. For the first time, leaders of a state were held accountable, not merely for losing a war, but for crimes against humanity. The world watched, believing a new moral era was being born. Yet this justice was selective. Many perpetrators were never tried somme bonissime. Others were quietly absorbed into new power structures. Scientific knowledge, military expertise, and strategic intelligence proved too valuable to discard in the name of ethics. This contradiction planted a dangerous seed. The belief that morality could be bent for geopolitical survival became a defining feature of the post-war world. Hitler's defeat did not eliminate the logic that the end justifies the means. It merely relocated it into a more sophisticated, quieter, and potentially more destructive context. Then came the final, brutal epilogue of the war. The emergence of nuclear weapons permanently altered humanity's relationship with its own survival. For the first time, total annihilation ceased to be a distant nightmare and became a technical possibility, calculable and real. Victory over Nazism coincided with the birth of permanent fear. No longer was the greatest dread invasion or defeat, but extinction itself. Peace came to mean not safety, but the temporary absence of catastrophe. Hitler's defeat accelerated this transformation. The post-war world became obsessed with anticipation, prevention, and control. Weapons grew more powerful, alliances more rigid, rhetoric more absolute. War did not disappear. It changed shape, spreading into proxy conflicts, covert operations, ideological struggles, and regional crises. Humanity had survived the greatest disaster in its history, yet had not learned how to live without one. In Eastern Europe, liberation carried a different meaning. Foreign armies did not withdraw. Governments were riche, political systems were imposed under the language of security and reconstruction. For millions, the end of Nazi rule did not mark the beginning of freedom, but the continuation of surveillance under a different banner. Victory there was proclaimed as salvation, but experienced as resignation. Official history spoke of progress, daily life spoke of scarcity, censorship, and fear. Beyond Europe, the consequences spread even further. Colonial powers, weakened and drained, could no longer sustain their overseas empires. Soldiers from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East had fought in a war waged in the name of freedom and self-determination. When they returned home, they found the old hierarchies intact. The contradiction was impossible to maintain. Independence movements surged. Some achieved sovereignty through negotiation. Others descended into prolonged and violent conflict. The world map began to change rapidly, often without preparation, leaving fragile states, artificial borders, and unresolved tensions. Paradoxically, Hitler's defeat opened the door to decades of global instability. By destroying the old European order, it created space for a new one that was not yet ready to function. International institutions were formed to prevent future catastrophes, but they were born shaped by the power imbalance between winners and losers. Ideals of cooperation coexisted with permanent rivalry. Peace became an administrative project rather than a lived reality. Over time, the memory of the war was reshaped, edited, simplified. Absolute evil was concentrated into a single figure, making the narrative easier to bear. By turning Hitler into a near-mythical embodiment of darkness, societies avoided confronting their own complicity, silence, and enthusiasm. History became comfortable. There were clear villains, clear heroes, and a seemingly just conclusion. Reality was far less forgiving. When the past is reduced to simple symbols, its lessons fade. Extremism does not vanish. It adapts, it waits, feeding on economic anxiety, identity crises, and collective frustration. Hitler's defeat did not eradicate authoritarianism, radical nationalism, or the dehumanization of others. It pushed them to the margins, where they remained dormant, waiting for opportunity. The world we inhabit today is a direct descendant of that silence in 1945. A world heavily armed, technologically advanced, yet deeply insecure. A world that remembers the greatest war in history while repeatedly failing to prevent new ones. Hitler's defeat was necessary, inevitable, and just, but it was incomplete. It saved humanity from a genocidal project, yet did not free it from itself. Perhaps the most profound and least acknowledged consequence of that defeat is this: in destroying the external enemy, humanity was forced to confront its own reflection. It discovered that evil does not live solely in exceptional men, but in systems, choices, and collective silence. It learned that civilization is fragile, and barbarism does not always announce its arrival. Often, it simply waits to be tolerated. History did not offer redemption. It offered responsibility, and the question that continues to echo from the ruins of Berlin to the dilemmas of the present is not merely how Hitler was defeated, but what humanity chose to do and failed to do with the victory it inherited. Because in the end, the fall of a tyrant does not guarantee the triumph of humanity. It only opens a chance. And missed chances have a way of returning, demanding their price.